Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. Thank you for taking the time to be here today. Today, we are presenting career exploration through the lens of equity, diversity, inclusion, and career services in higher education with Christopher Taylor. My name is Lori Burris, and I'm the Education Innovation Advisor at LinkedIn Learning, the leading provider of learning online videos, and I'll be moderating the session. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. Don't worry, we'll be sending out an on-demand recording of this webinar as soon as it's available, and any presentation decks or additional materials will be sent to you as well. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel. We'll bring them up during the presentation, and we'll also have time for questions and answers at the end of this session. I encourage you to share socially with your audience members. You can use hashtag HEDleaders. And for those of you joining us for the very first time in this series of webinars, welcome, and know that we love hearing from you. Today, the format is a conversation, a dialogue followed by questions. Now, without further ado, let's hear from Christopher. Chris, take a moment to briefly share a little bit about who you are as a speaker, a career coach, a writer, a LinkedIn Learning author, and founder of The Career Optimist. You are one of the top 15 people for job seekers to follow on LinkedIn Learning, on LinkedIn's feed. And I personally follow you daily on LinkedIn. You have features post after post about thoughtful stories and exceptional advice for anyone in the middle of a career search, or at this point in COVID, in a career switch. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, thank you so much, Lori. It's amazing to be speaking with you today. Once again, my name is Christopher Taylor. I'm a career coach who helps people find and land their dream jobs. Now, prior to coaching, I worked as an executive recruiter for a major global recruiting agency for a number of years, learning the ins and outs of the recruiting world and observing what made candidates stand out, what hiring managers and recruiters were looking for, and how people could get that competitive edge. I've placed top talent at all the companies we've heard of, from Facebook to HBO, Johnson & Johnson, MailChimp, Salesforce, Nike, the first woman president of a major university out in the Midwest, a lot of just great companies and organizations. As far as what I do, that there are really two components to my work and my mission: working with individual professionals to land the jobs they want, and educating the public about networking and other ways to build their career. I've written for, I've been featured in a number of publications, from the Wall Street Journal to Forbes to Fortune, Business Insider, and on. I've partnered with LinkedIn to author courses on the LinkedIn Learning platform, reached over 50,000 students. My most recent course that I love for you all to take a look at is Finding a Job at Companies That Embrace Diversity and Inclusion. And last, I've consulted organizations on recruiting diverse talent and colleges on helping students prioritize equity in the job search. So super excited to be here and can't wait to get the discussion started.
So I'm really happy about this too. The first part of the interview will be mostly questions to help people in career services roles on campuses from the administrative point of view. And the second half is a lot about what the students are facing and how we can help students better prepare for getting careers of companies that meet the values that they want to have and share in their life. So what are your thoughts on how career centers understand the bias related challenges that students face in the workforce? You've researched and uncovered some interesting data here.
Yeah, so I can't generalize too much when it comes to career services or career centers understandings, but the stats do seem to show that there are clear gaps in post-graduation employment. We're seeing 40% of Black people with college degrees working in jobs that don't need degrees, compared to 31% of white graduates. When it comes to bias-related issues that graduates face, diverse candidates have lower rates of fulfillment, less stability, and are at a higher risk of job loss via restructuring. We're seeing that Black people generally have 2 times the unemployment rate of whites, Latinx people about 1.5 times the unemployment rate of white people. According to the Harvard Business Review, we found that women and minorities are more likely to be downsized because they're more likely to be kept in lower level positions, which are viewed as expendable. We're seeing poor engagement even after folks do land that job, because oftentimes they are facing discrimination after getting in the door. With that being said, I think it's very important to note that when people feel included, they perform better and they stay longer. Recently saw a Gallup poll saying that companies with higher engagement rates have 21% higher profitability, 17% higher productivity, and 59% less turnover.
So it's really good to hear that companies are finally starting to tie that cultural thing with the ROI and the productivity. And it really does, from what you're saying, show that there's movement there, that we can say having this diverse culture and these diverse values can actually improve the company's ability to be productive and make money.
Absolutely.
So you did, though, give us a lot of areas where we have room for improvement. So what are some areas that career centers can do better?
Yeah. I think the goal used to be to land a job with anyone who will take you. It was like the magic formula was like company name meets compensation structure. I think the goal is becoming land the right opportunity with the right company. And by right, I'm emphasizing cultural fit. So, I recommend that career centers teach students how to determine if a job is the right cultural fit by looking out for certain red flags. And I think when you do that, it's going to help your school's reputation and standing by preparing your students to understand what's best for them prior to meeting with these companies.
Yeah, and I think the students want it. I mean, at least my experience, I'm teaching in graduate area at USC. The students are asking me all the time, where would I be a good fit? Where's the cultural fit? What kind of values does this company have?
Yeah.
They're thinking about climate change. They're thinking about Black Lives Matter.
Yes.
These are issues that matter to the young people that are currently in college. So how do we identify bias from potential employers? And I think this is hard to do. And what are the tips that we can share with students on how to handle bias when they encounter it?
Yeah.
So it's kind of a two-part, it's a
Absolutely.
loaded question. I mean, there's a lot of companies that look great on paper.
Yeah.
How do I identify that?
Yeah, I think when you think about that question as a whole, I think there's good news and I think there's bad news. I think the good news is there are a lot of data sources out there, but the bad news is there's really not much summarizing data, right? So you need to look for employers with red flags, and a lot of times those red flags for some employers are really big, whereas they may be hidden when it comes to others. When it comes to signs of bias or signs of high potential for bias, one of the things that I always say you want to look at is non-diverse leadership. So minimal diversity in race as well as gender amongst the leadership team at a variety of different levels. That's a big one. Lack of employee resource groups, so ERGs, especially groups for diverse employees. Minimal diversity or recognition of minority issues in the company's social media presence is a red flag. And then one of the biggest red flags you see is Glassdoor reviews. Glassdoor is going to help you out big time when it comes to understanding what to expect. When you're seeing Glassdoor reviews that are mentioning bias, that's going to tell you a lot. With that being said, you also want to look for signs of inclusion. So you want to take a look at best places to work lists and placement on those best places to work lists, especially those lists that are geared toward diversity. Specifically, looking at a company's career page, for example, and look at any type of DEI efforts that are being highlighted on their website or on the career page, especially if they're showing concrete actions. And then also take a look at charitable donations to organizations that support equity for minorities. And then likewise, when it comes to any type of donations to political candidates that support equity for minorities. Now, the second half of that question is going to be, what to do when students are encountering this bias during the job search. And a lot of that's going to come down to where they are in the search. Are we talking about the early stages or the later stages? Now, if we're talking about the early stages, of the job search, I'd recommend networking with current or past employees to ask about their experiences to ensure if what that student feels is valid. I'd recommend researching deeper to take a look at any other red flags or positive signs that they may have missed. And then, of course, asking you all, the Career Service Center, your input on possible cultural fit or what to expect based on prior experiences with that company. If we're talking about the later stages in the game, so maybe like right around offer time, for example, when you're late in the interview process, I'd recommend talking to internal team members like we'll say ERG members, employee resource group members, or a VP of inclusion or a chief people officer, chief diversity officer. And then also you always have the option to network with alumni when you're at this stage.
I think those are some key and important ideas. And mainly what you're saying is to do some research.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the things that students don't realize is you can download the org chart of almost any organization, university or company. The publicly traded companies have to put it up there. Universities have to put it up there to get their funding. These are you can find these job positions and these leadership roles easily. The second thing is, I think, explain just a little bit more to students who might be listening to this what ERGs are. I know that that's a word that people inside a company use all the time, but it's not familiar to people in higher ed as much. It's not used as frequently.
Yeah,
So give
yeah,
us an example of what an ERG group might be.
absolutely. So ERG stands for Employee Resource Groups, and this is typically a group of diverse employees that come together to advocate for each other. So it could be, we'll say, women's network. It could be company I worked for previously, the ERG group for African Americans was the Black Champions Network. It could be a group for LGBT plus. It could be, Asian. It could be, kind of a Hispanic group. Just it's a group of people that come together that are from the same background that come together to kind of advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion within the workplace.
And just to give you an example of what LinkedIn's done, I mean, for the first time ever, LinkedIn has 4 different generations of people working at the company. It's not all 20 to 30-year-olds. And they've started a group for people over 50. I joined it. It's called
That's important.
Wisdom. And so it's to have people who have years and years of experience share that experience, become mentors, mentee programs, and things like that. So these are really important, and these are questions that anyone can ask Career Center or a student at the time of an interview when you're trying to form these relationships. It's perfectly okay when it's your turn to ask questions to say, where do you fall on your value, your cultural system, your vision statement? You can look up any company's vision statement. Those are things to really search out. What steps can career centers take to build inclusion as part of this process?
Yeah, I think the first thing career centers want to do is educate themselves on the issues of bias, how bias comes about, how to help students and graduates overcome bias. I think you want to ask diverse groups who they're interested in and why. So, want to ask these groups on campus, what companies are you taking a look at? What companies excite you? When companies visit campus, research those companies beforehand to know which ones may be the right fit for your students. And I'd say even prior to having these companies visit campus, have them fill out some type of inclusionary type of information in advance. Maybe it's a one-pager that you could possibly share with students. I'd recommend ensuring that career centers are closely tracking those best places to work lists, especially those lists that are kind of pointed toward diversity, and make sure that you're taking a look at the more updated list. Culture can change fairly quickly, as does leadership. I'd make sure that as a career center, you're maintaining relationships with alums to understand their experiences with different employers. And then I recommend taking it beyond the career fair and allowing students to get a more in-depth insight into sessions or alumni networking programs. And I think last, when necessary, even step outside of the box and educate employers about DEI and how prioritizing DEI can help them. We've seen that DEI decreases turnover and it drives profit. So it is mutually beneficial. Catalyst.org says that positive inclusion can improve engagement by 35%, intent to stay by 20%, and employee innovation by 18%. So the numbers are there.
You make 2 really strong points there, that we can't do this alone, that forming grassroots coalitions, forming partnerships with it's students, university, employers, it's got to work all together.
Yeah.
And I think the second one is that the power of an alum, since we, as you pointed out,
Mm,
schools are not focused so much on how many seats are filled and how many jobs are filled as they are the accountability. And accountability is a whole different ball game. It means, does the degree matter? What does the degree mean? What does the degree lead you to in terms of career and career development? And that's really where we're fundamentally at. That's a huge shift for higher ed, to be moving from counting seats and jobs to
yeah.
thinking about how are we accountable for the students we prepare and the jobs we prepare them for. And I think that's a really different mindset. It's a trend I'm seeing more and more, and I've seen it in the last year really surge amongst the campuses. So how can career centers track their student successes and use that data effectively and strategically?
Yeah, I think that analyzing how job placement in general stacks up against different groups is just a starting point. So I think when it comes to data and making sure that you're tracking things in an effective manner, we want to make sure that the tracking doesn't stop when students leave campus.
Yeah, and I think some schools have this really figured out, and for other schools it's more difficult. If you're listening to this broadcast right now and you want to put in the chat some of the difficulties or challenges of using data and tracking students after they leave school, I mean, that is one thing that's really, just to do a shameless plug for LinkedIn, we have the ability to see on profiles people in school and out of school. We can see them at work and not at work when we track both pieces of that data. It's an amazing, for me, coming from 30 years of higher ed, I was just amazed because when I worked at Pasadena City College, I only knew what the students were doing while they were under my care, or if they kept in touch with me. Now we have these amazing abilities like LinkedIn and other companies where we can actually see when people are in school, out of school, or doing both at the same time. So the data there is much richer than it was 5-10 years ago. I think we can use it much more intelligently. Alumni relationships are really important when capturing data, particularly with the emphasis on career growth, how we can grow people over a lifetime. What are some ways that you think are important to use alumni data, and what are the questions we can ask of our alums?
Yeah, I would recommend putting together, periodic email surveys for alum, and then kind of taking that next step and periodically tracking alums on LinkedIn to see their career progression or to fill in the gaps of those individuals who may not have returned your surveys. I think when it comes to different questions or data that you want to track, I say, one, are you employed in a field that uses your degree? Two, what management or progression level have you reached? How many promotions have you received in the past 10 years? How much is your pay increase in the past 10 years? How satisfied are you with your current employment? And I'd say last, rate your current and previous employers on their inclusiveness and equity.
And also, we know for a fact that in the first 5 years after graduating from college, there'll be a lot of movement in careers. A typical thing right now is 1.5 to 2 years. You may have 3 jobs in your first 5 to 6 years of employment right after graduation. That mobility doesn't mean you're a flake, but it's kind of where that student is finding where they belong in the work career landscape, and where they're best suited and where they're being groomed and where there's opportunity for them. So there can be a lot of change in those first 5 years. After about 8 to 10 years of employment, we really see that it really settles and you become very reliant on your own personal network and your own career network, and you hear jobs and you make decisions, and you're probably also now making commitments for family building, choosing locations that fit those things you've been talking about all day long, that fit your values of where you want to live, the economics, the community, the education, the health services. And those decisions get made typically 8 to 12 years after you're leaving college, because you've now got a better sense of that. So there's a lot of things to track here with alum. And I think it's, as you brought forward, there's there's the beginning and middle of the end of the interview. There's the beginning and middle and how careers mature, that you can learn a lot of information to help people get guided to the right location. We'll get to this sooner, but it's making me think of other things while I'm talking to you. It's so interesting. How can career centers create a plan or a strategic playbook around diversity, inclusion, and equity issues?
Yeah, it's a good one. I think you want to know what other schools are doing, and I think you want to determine what you can implement at your school. So especially take a look at HBCUs, women's colleges, schools with high rates of diversity. This has been a focal point for these schools for a long time. So they're likely to have strategies to help students deal with bias. I'd recommend surveying students and alums about what they think may help prepare them. I'd institute an ongoing process or cycle of surveying alums, developing a survey, sending it out every year to students who graduated at, we'll say, the 5-year mark, the 10-year mark, the 15-year mark, and the 20-year mark, making sure that every alum gets surveyed every 5 years. And I think the last thing I do, and this is a big one, develop a database of major employers and start with the top employers in your area and work outward from there. But you want to gather data about their DEI stats, the DEI efforts they're making, and then scores from alums.
So in your own personal experience as a Black man graduating from college,
Yeah.
how did this work for you initially? Did you fall into the right companies, the wrong companies? How did you navigate this early on yourself?
Yeah, when I graduated, it was a different generation. I came out of school in 2004. I guess technically I guess it would be like a late millennial or maybe an early millennial, depending on how you look at it. But we were talking about the way that folks looked at things in the past versus how you look at it now. When I was coming out of school, I was all about that magic formula, which was, company name and compensation structure. So the thought process was, this great company recruited me. I've heard of them before, which is really exciting, Fortune 500 company, and they're going to pay me a lot of money. It wasn't really the thought of what I was passionate about, what I wanted to do, where I could see myself, what was the best fit for me, career culture. None of that stuff really made too much of a difference, unfortunately. And luckily now society has completely done a 180. And things are different now, and people are looking at company culture. But I kind of rolled the dice. I started with the company. They moved me across the country. My first role was in Omaha, Nebraska. I moved from Virginia to Nebraska. I'd never been to Nebraska. I couldn't find Nebraska on the map, and I went with it. And I stayed there with that company for over a decade. Moved all across the country, even though I really didn't want to move. I moved Nebraska, Arkansas, Philly, New York, Georgia. But the company wasn't really a great fit for me. Unfortunately, I didn't know then what I know now. Nor did I have the resources then that I have now, nor did I know how to network then like I do now. I didn't know the questions to ask. So, hopefully I can pass that out to, the next person.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being so vulnerable about that question, because I think so many students just think, oh, I've spent, $100,000 of my parents' money or my money, or between loans and scholarships. And then they're thinking, it looks good on paper. It looks like it, all the I's are dotted and the T's crossed, but they don't have a sense of it. I mean, like when you walk into a house, even though you don't know the floor plan, you kind of know where everything is. But when you walk into a new job after you've been in school most of your life, you don't always have a sense of what that's going to be. And I think that's something that you have taught me, is that we can take the time to consider that. And I think it's something that career centers can emphasize more, kind of visualizing what you want and what that looks like, and what, thinking what those core qualities are that you want to list and matter in your life to be more satisfied. I know we diverged a little bit there. So now we're sort of to the second half of the questions, which are more focused on student issues. And one of them is, I'm going to start off by being fairly vulnerable myself. My son went to Princeton. My daughter went to Northwestern. Never, ever went to a career center, and graduated top GPA, never asking for a letter of recommendation from anyone that they knew on campus. Not a teacher, not an advisor, not a school drama coach, nothing. where did I go wrong? But I want you to, and that my children I consider to be really privileged and to have everything they wanted. I realize that not everyone has equal access to career related opportunities. Not every school has a great fleet of 10 people helping them find careers, or the incredible maybe alumni network that Princeton has. So how can career centers level the playing field and make that be more equitable?
Yeah, I think when it comes to leveling the playing field, the first thing career students want to do is begin by just kind of educating themselves on the issues, right? So meeting with on-campus organizations to understand diverse needs and begin to assess the gap. From there, I'd recommend partnering with fellowships or outside organizations with the purpose of driving success of diverse students, right? That could be an ACLU, NAACP, just really local organizations that are aimed at improving professional equity for minorities. And there are so many out there. From there, I'd make sure that you're focusing on not only securing jobs after graduation, but also securing internships, right? And internships are going to start to build that lasting relationship while also showing a student's professional capabilities. Also, internships can be a great way to get in the door of a strong organization, versus apply and get buried in a pile of resumes after graduation. I'd recommend establishing mentoring programs for alumni with students, or establish other ways for students, especially diverse students, to take advantage of the alumni network. I think another thing that's super important is just teaching students how to network in general. And I've spent a lot of time with colleges helping their students just kind of learn how to network. I didn't know how to network when I was that age, and a lot of adults know how to network, right? But teaching students to network, or how to network with complete strangers. Like, we've got our family, we've got our friends, we've got our professors, but networking with complete strangers is really powerful. And that's going to go a long way with diverse candidates when you teach them how to network, because it's scary enough networking with someone who looks like you, but reaching across cultural lines can be even more intimidating. And then last, I say make sure you're holding workshops for students, specifically discussing bias in the workplace and how to secure jobs with the right employer. So once again, that cultural fit.
So just to throw some LinkedIn data at you all, we know that if a student puts on their profile that they've had an internship or community or volunteer work, a recruiter will look at that as though that's the equivalent to full-time work experience. So one of the things that's simply underreported by students, and I work with students all the time on their profiles, is I'll say, did you do any courses where you worked with a community organization or a company through your coursework? And they all go, yeah. And I go, is that on your profile? And they go, no, we only did it for one semester. I said, but you did it. It is so easy to forget it's so easy for students to forget that the profile isn't a transcript. It's a set of experiences that you had through school and through professional experiences. Also, let's go a little bit deeper dive into the networking, because you are right. I mean, the data that we have at LinkedIn says you are 12 times more likely to get a job, 12 times more likely to get a job if you have a network that's you've reached out to and supports you and mentors you and advocates on your behalf. Those are huge, huge statistics. I know from my point of view as an instructor, one of the things that I tell people is to set up informational interviews. Don't ask for jobs, ask for what the job is like. I don't know what some of your top tips are for creating more networks.
Yeah. So I think one of the things you want to keep in mind when you're a student, and I think about this all the time, right now I'm about to turn 40 in about 2 or 3 weeks, and consider myself to be a really good networker. A lot of times when I reach out to folks, they'll get back to me. But when someone who's 40 reaches out to you and they want to have a conversation, you never met them before, people will help you out, but they're not quite as excited as they are to help out a young person, right? Everyone wants to help out young people, right? So now's the time to really throw yourself out there and take a chance. And I can almost guarantee that if you reach out to someone who's a complete stranger who's doing, what you want to do as a student or what you want to do when you graduate, working for the companies you want to work for, people are excited to guide you. People are excited to mentor you. People are excited to teach you how to get in the door. People want to help young people.
I think this is so true. And the thing I tell people to that point is I get asked all the time to do this, and I
Yeah.
never say no. I'm sure you
Always
do
say
too,
yes.
Christopher.
Always say yes.
And I just have to hold them to a time limit. I can
And I
give
have
you
fun.
20
And I
to,
like doing it. I have fun doing it.
yeah,
The win-win.
I just usually say I've only got 20 to 30 minutes. Can't be
Which
a
is more
dark,
than
it
enough.
can't be a black hole of time. So students, my suggestion to you is when you're making that, write a note explaining exactly what kind of information you're after and what the time length is going to be. And don't get upset if they don't answer you right away. I mean, if you're calling a head animator at a game company, maybe they're under the crunch and they'll get back to you 3 weeks later, not the next day. The second thing is allow it to have what I call the ripple effect. Often these conversations, at least in my experience with students mentioning you should maybe contact, I usually tell people to move forward. I give 3 other contacts for them to go after. Um,
Absolutely.
it may take 1 or 2 or 3 months, but they may all of a sudden say, you know, that student you sent to me, there's a job opening here at such and such, or there's this opportunity for an internship. So these are like planting seeds, not instant gratification. It's not a slot machine at Las Vegas. Think of it as
Absolutely.
like I'm planting these seeds, and in 3 to 6 months, I'll probably have something that comes out of that. So I really have found that's one of the hidden powers of LinkedIn, especially during COVID. It's so easy to set up a virtual coffee. It's just easier than it's ever been. And don't feel weird about doing it. Christopher made the point. It doesn't matter if it's a complete stranger. It really doesn't. Everyone who's a professional really wants to help young people right now. That's absolutely true. It's something we can do. It's actually something we can do actionably for young people during COVID. So moving on, as students seek jobs, how can a student ensure a company is aligned with values on diversity and equity and inclusion and social justice? What are some of the things that from the student point of view, who may not have access to the career centers or doesn't feel comfortable going to career services?
Yeah, I'd start by looking at a company's social media presence. Everyone's going to have a presence on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Taking a look at their social media and understanding who's being represented, understanding who's being celebrated, understanding what types of employees are receiving recognition. Are they posting about issues that affect diverse employees? From there, you want to take a look at a company's leadership. Do you see a diverse group of executives and managers? Looking at that career page on the website, once again, looking for those ERGs. On the website, are they talking about DEI related efforts? Glassdoor, looking at those Glassdoor reviews. What do employees and alums say about experiences of bias or experiences of inclusion? Checking out charitable contribution records and campaign contribution records can tell you a lot about a company's value system. And then making sure you're on top of those best places to work lists, especially those lists that are going to be related to diversity, inclusion, or company culture.
There's also kind of a secret weapon that I learned from you, which is look at the
Yeah.
photographs. Look at the
Yes.
photographs. Are they
There's a
all
lot
stock image? Is it the one black guy 10 times on every
over and
single
over again.
campaign?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, is it, there's, really, I mean, we have really, because of you, Christopher, just to let you know, internally, we have now taken pictures of literally thousands of our own employees at all 35 offices in the globe to make available to put into our presentations. And I got the compliment the other day is, Laura, you always show interesting people and so many diverse people. And I said, well, they're just all employees of LinkedIn. We really are trying not to use stock images and not to have the same stock image be in every webinar and every presentation that we do. So I'm just letting you know, you have had a significant impact on the way we're thinking about presenting ourselves to our clients.
Makes my day. That's great.
Yeah, and it's just a simple one. I mean, that's so easy to detect. Outside diversity statements on an employer site, they're often there. I mean, almost everybody since March 2020 and the Black Lives Matter movement has put some kind of diversity statement on their website, and that's true of higher education as well as companies. But how do you know if the company is authentically committed? It's easy to write words. It's not easy always to demonstrate actions or behaviors. How do you separate the truth from performative gesture?
Yeah, I think when you're looking online at those online commitments that may be publicized, you want to make sure that you're seeing action steps, versus things just kind of be written out in general terms. So I think that's a good start. Um, Remembering once again that everything starts with leadership. So understanding who the leadership is, who's being represented, who isn't being represented. You can find a lot out with LinkedIn. You can really dig into folks' past, but also it's kind of understand, are you seeing women? Are you seeing leadership of color? Are you seeing that diversity there? Um, try to see if you could find titles or positions that are specifically dedicated to diversity, equity, and inclusion, such as vice president of inclusion or chief diversity officer. And then also make sure you're doing a lot of networking, so having conversations with alums as well as current employees and former employees.
And this is again a question that's perfectly okay to bring up at an informational interview or at a real live interview. For instance, after knowing preparing for this, I went to our IT department and I said, can you give me the stats on how many women were in IT in LinkedIn 10 years ago versus now? The numbers have improved, so there was data on that. But then I asked, how many of those women that great increase in women are now in leadership roles, directors or managers of teams? And they
Mhm.
said, well, it's improved, but not nearly as much as what we'd like. And I said, and what are you doing to address that? And they said, we are now having a mentor program, especially in our STEM related areas in LinkedIn, to make sure that we have mentors guiding women into these roles and not making them afraid to take them on, not feeling that it will be a challenge to their ability to be a wife, a mother, have children, and still have these jobs.
Mhm.
And what kind of culture we can make it so that it's more attractive to them. So you want to hear those kinds of answers where the stats are improving. You want to hear that women are not just getting in, you could, they're not just getting in at one level, but never reaching another level. I think there's the two-part question there. And then what are you doing internally? What are the actions you take internally to improve those stats? All three of those questions are perfectly acceptable to ask. And particularly, I think in the areas of technology, it's worth asking. Maybe it is not as important, but I think another area where that would be important is in terms of project manager. There's a gazillion project managers or business
Mhm.
analysts or business strategy
Yeah.
people. And those are typically entry-level jobs for a lot of college graduates. But what are the paths? Ask what are the opportunities there for different people of color, for women, for people who, if I get married, is this going to throw me off the track? Those are questions you can ask. You do not have to reveal any of that information during an interview, but I think it's smart to be thinking about asking them how they're accountable.
Mm. Yeah.
As interest shifts, and you have to be afraid, don't be afraid. That's what I was going to tell you. What I've learned from Christopher is
Be
don't be
courageous.
afraid.
Yeah. It's not
Be
easy, but
honest.
be courageous, be honest. Yeah. It's going
Yeah,
to help you out in the long
because
run.
it's not worth just trying to fit in as opposed to having a fit.
Yeah.
There's two different processes there. As interest shifts, and I'm going to get into some more difficult questions because clearly we're
Mhm.
in a very disruptive time, which is bringing lots of innovation and causing lots of changes, a lot for the good. But while that's happening, as I say, the canoe's rocking a bit. As interest shifts from some of the traumas and outcries we saw in the summer of 2020, the Black Lives Matter, the Me Too movement, what do you forecast for the future? What do you see the future looking like in this area?
Yeah. I mean, I think that a lot of companies have made promises, but I think there's no way to know if companies are going to keep up with the promises they've made surrounding diversity, equity, inclusion. I'd give extra credit to those companies who were taking action before Black Lives Matter, before the Me Too movement. But a lot of it's going to depend on leadership, and a lot of times leadership comes, and a lot of times leadership goes. But I think the other thing that's important is I think it's also sometimes okay to take a leap of faith. A lot of companies didn't take any type of stand or craft any type of initiative. So to move forward, so you want to give credit basically to those who actually did moving forward. And I think the other thing you want to keep in mind as whether you're a student or a recent graduate, you have the option to get involved when you get in the door in order to make sure that these efforts that are important to you actually continue.
And that's one of the things that's really great about you, Christopher. You're willing to have a lot of awkward, difficult conversations. And
Yeah.
these kinds of these kinds of issues engender a lot of awkwardness. But the more we talk about them, the easier it is to move forward and to share and accept different perspectives and to have greater empathy for each other's positions.
Mm,
I mean, look at you. You've branched out and you have your own business now just to
yeah.
talk about these very important issues. What do you expect will shift between now and the next incident? Because there will always be a next incident.
Of
Because
course.
as we all know, oppression doesn't stop when the news cycle ends.
Yeah, I think that whether you see it as good or bad, I think that cancel culture has instilled a lot of fear. I think a lot of people are voting with their wallets and they're sending the message about the types of people, the types of companies, the type of values that they will and won't support. I think that in the least, companies are learning what's now acceptable moving forward. And I think that companies will better understand the financial benefits of being on the right side of history. And it's my belief that, even if people are taking positive actions for the wrong reasons, they're still taking positive action and the community still benefits.
Good to know. I'm glad
Yeah.
well, there's a reason your company's name has its name, optimism in it.
Right, right.
So, Anna, just to give you a heads up, I'm heading into my last question and then we'll go to the attendees for their questions. How can we know if the changes made at the height of the protests will be maintained? What can we do to make sure that the work we're doing now moves forward?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any way to predict the future, but I think the same positive and negative signs are going to continue to be there for years moving forward. Positive signs being evidence of employee resource groups, DEI strategies on the company's side, Glassdoor and online reviews mentioning inclusion, diverse leadership, inclusive social media, and those negative signs being a lack of diverse leadership and negative reviews talking about bias.
Yeah, I think there's just generally more awareness, don't you? I mean,
Absolutely.
you can't go back under the rock. I mean, there's a
No.
general more awareness. At least I've noticed it on the campuses. If you're working in higher ed like I do,
Yeah.
both in a company and on a campus, I've been to 8 trainings on diversity, inclusion, and
Mhm.
belonging issues. I'm seeing a flurry of new roles at colleges. It's not just the people officer, it's the diversity, inclusion, belonging. It's the person making those statements and how to support the different groups on campus and the different policies. And when something does happen that's disruptive or goes
Yeah.
against what the equity things are, how is that campus addressing it? What are the processes involved to address these issues? What is the way to have a fair way of judging people's behavior without it being canceled? So there's some real tough issues going on, and I see a lot of work being done on the campuses, and I think it's a healthy conversation, even if it's an awkward. There's other things that you can also think about that you haven't mentioned. There's one more thing, which are ally groups. Have you in your own career had allies that helped you? This is something we talk about at LinkedIn all the time.
Yeah. So I haven't come across ally groups in the way that I think we speak of allies today, actual like formalized ally groups, almost similar to how there would be an ERG group, almost like an ERG group for allies. So I haven't come across that in my career. I think it's an awesome idea, but I have come across a number of personal allies, personal one-on-one allies, individuals who I know are allies, who made it be known that they were allies. And those individuals make, when I say all the difference in the world, I wish there were words that were strong enough to express how big of a difference those issues have made in my career, or those individuals have made in my career, as well as my day-to-day, just happiness, level of contentment, pushing through it all, getting to the next level. It means everything.
Yeah, I am seeing a little push to that in companies. I don't see it as much on college campus of what you would call a more formal allyship.
Yeah, but I
We
love
have
that.
we have it at LinkedIn, and it came out of the fact that by working remotely, we were realizing that new people being onboarded didn't have any face-to-face relationships with
Mm.
people, and how could we introduce them to other parts of the company and other people in different roles in the company. So now we have a more formalized program and allyship where you end up being with a band of people who you might not necessarily ever have a meeting with, but have shared interests, shared goals, different points of perspective inside the company, and talk about some of the very same difficult issues that you and I are talking about right now. So Anna, I'm going to go to you now and find out if we have any questions from the attendees.
Hi, thank you so much for this amazing discussion. So far, I'm not seeing any questions outstanding, but maybe we can give it a second here. Oh, actually, we just got a new question in.
Yay!
So we have Jake asking, what tips would you offer for a school that for a number of reasons are hitting the reset button on their efforts and looking to make a sincere effort to walk the walk?
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I think, I'd say making sure that you're gathering a diverse group of people to kind of push those efforts forward. I think that would be important. I think not only, gathering folks who are, staff and faculty, but also making sure that you understand the students' needs, the students' wants, and the students' concerns. Understand exactly where those gaps are and what you need to do in order to be there for your students. But I think having a diverse group of people from, not only different backgrounds, but also different areas of campus, I think that'll go a long way.
Anything else, Anna? Well, before we close, if we're done with the quick Q&A from the audience, I just wanted to take a moment to cheerlead and promote 2 existing courses that Christopher is doing on LinkedIn Learning. He has a very popular course called Digital Networking Strategies. We've just heard the tip of the iceberg of that information today. And he also has a course called Finding a Job at Companies That Embrace Diversity and Inclusion, which was really the inspiration for me to reach out to Christopher and to set up the session to begin with. But Christopher, you've got 3 new courses coming up. So could you can you give us a little heads up?
So I can't speak too much of those courses. I can't give titles or anything like that, but just like, please, follow me. I love to share those courses with you. And if you could just connect with me, anyone who's here listening, or even anyone who's listening to the recording, please, bare minimum, reach out to me, via LinkedIn, drop me a note, let's connect, and let's have a conversation at some point.
Yeah, I want you to know that Christopher, just through what he's done in his posts, has become one of the most valued people by the LinkedIn editors. Whenever we have discussions on our LinkedIn newsfeed about things that are going on during hiring or data on hiring, Christopher's often pulled in as one of those outside people that gives their point of view on that issue that day. That's a feature that you have in LinkedIn feed that isn't existing like in the New York Times, where an article is written about a news item and then LinkedIn editors go across our network to see what kinds of different people and different roles and positions can give insight about that issue that day. It's one of my favorite things. And if you follow Christopher, you'll learn about that feature on LinkedIn. So thank you so much, Christopher. I know this has taken like a year and a lot to get us to this point today, but this is so important. And this is such a good time to be having this discussion. It's January. All you students, all of you career service specialists at the higher ed level, this is the time to really be thinking deeply, getting into this research and reaching out to those companies and to the alums. Whenever we look for a job, we have a list of wants for our new positions. And in addition to standard concerns like salary, location, hours, benefits, more and more attention is being placed on diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And the challenging part is that while any company can say they embrace diversity and inclusion, is there a way to really know? Today, Christopher's given us so many insights on the ways that we can uncover this and learn more about ourselves and learn more about others by doing some deep research, doing some deep observation, and using the data that is available that wasn't available 10, 15 years ago to people like Christopher and myself. I want to let you all know what's coming up next. Again, a big thank you for joining us today. Your time means a lot to me. We hope to see you the next time in the Higher Education Leaders event on Thursday, February 24th at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time. And it's an interview with one of my favorite people, Barbara Oakley. She's the author of Uncommon Sense Teaching and Learn Like a Pro. She teaches people how to learn techniques to help master any material based on neuroscience and cognitive psychology. Neuroscientists and cognitive scientists have made enormous strides in understanding the brain and how we learn, but little of that insight has filtered into the way teachers teach or the way students learn. Barb applies this research to the classroom for teachers, educators, and anyone interested in improving education. Topics include keeping learners motivated and engaged, which is a big deal right now during COVID and this high flex environment we're in, especially while doing online learning. And she's a great proponent of online learning and some of the great benefits that online learning affords that the face-to-face classroom doesn't afford. What else I love about Barbara is she never quits writing books about this. If you haven't had a chance to read a book, she has all kinds of books from K through 12 all the way through college. And even the book I'm reading right now is called Mind Shift. What if you had one set of skills you thought you were good at and now your career is at a flat spot, there's no opportunities, you're at a U-turn. How can you translate and pivot those skills into something new, into a new career or to a new opportunity? I think a lot of people are doing that during what we call at LinkedIn the Great Reshuffle. There's never been a time where people have had more power to and more time to be introspective and think about what they want for their work-life balance. What does that mean to me? What do I want it to be like? Do I want to give up the 3 hours of commute per day so I can be home to help my wife in the morning with the kids and be able to run and then go into work? I mean, these are things that people are seriously considering. What company benefits do I get if I'm a woman and I do have a catastrophic event like Chicago closing down the public schools for 2 or 3 weeks? These are all things that people are thinking about right now. Barbara's really in touch with all of this. She also has the most popular Coursera course in history of Coursera, which is a course called Learning How to Learn, and I've taken that. So if you haven't had a chance to meet Barbara Oakley, she's pragmatic, she's a deep, deep researcher, she's a polymath, and she's so much fun to talk to. And she talks almost as fast as I do. I hope I see you for the next time. For all our future and past events, you can watch them again. There's recordings available. You just go to highereducationleaders.splashthought.com. And thank you, everyone. And Christopher, thank you so much for doing this today.
Thank
and
you.
That's a wrap, guys.